Biscotti are twice-baked cookies. Very crunchy, very dry, very dippable. I love them, but sometimes I think they can be just jaw-shattering, so I've tried to get a dough recipe here that's a little more tender, a little more delicate, and it works as a flavor-neutral base. You can mix it up, divide it, and then bake a few different flavors all at once. Step 1 is to soften a stick of butter, either by leaving it out or microwaving it on low power, 10 or 15 seconds at a time. Nuke, rotate very carefully until it's soft, not melted. That's 4 ounces, 113 grams. Then 1 1/3 cups of sugar, about 270 grams. In that big mixing bowl, I will cream the butter and the sugar as best I can. The sugar quantity is kind of high for this. You might not get the butter looking super fluffy, but you're still definitely cutting little air bubbles into the fat that'll make the texture lighter at the end. The purportedly original biscotti recipe from Tuscany has no fat at all in it. Do that if you want, but the butter is what gets you more of a shortbread taste and texture. I think literally every English language recipe I've seen has fat in it, like any other cookie. I'm going to crack in 3 eggs. You could divide this whole recipe by 3 if you wanted a smaller batch. And while almond is the traditional flavoring, I'm going to put a little splash of vanilla in at this stage. We'll do the almond flavor later. Get that beaten really smooth to the point where you can see it making ribbons like that. Again, this will lighten the texture at the end. I used unsalted butter today, so I'm putting in half a teaspoon of Morton kosher, about 3 grams. That'll make these just a little noticeably salty, which I want. A scant half teaspoon of baking powder, a couple of grams. Again, the traditional recipe has no leavening at all. And 3 cups of flour to start with, 360 grams. We're going to add more. This is just the baseline. Get all that mixed in and smooth. At this point, it's about as wet and sticky as a typical cookie dough. For biscotti, I think you'd traditionally mix in enough flour to where it's barely wet or sticky at all. I'm going for a happy medium. I think I ended up putting in almost a whole additional cup, so maybe 470, 480 grams total, 4 cups. There's a lot of wiggle room here. I like it when it's dry enough that it doesn't stick to you when you smash it like that, but it does still feel wet. That's our base dough. That's going to be moist enough to be tender, but still dry enough to absorb your morning brew, which you could enjoy whilst reading Morning Brew, the sponsor of this video. That's what I do. Morning Brew is a free daily newsletter that rounds up the latest in business, finance, and tech. I find it's a much more pleasant way for me to keep informed instead of mindlessly scrolling through people yelling on social media. Morning Brew starts with market news written in a fun voice that's easy to understand even if you're not a stocks nerd. Then they'll summarize all the day's big stories. US and EU talking about waiving patent protections for vaccines for obvious reasons. I like how Morning Brew lays out this text. If I want to know the counter argument, it's bolded and set apart, easy for my eye to find. The whole newsletter is always super skimmable, and the writing is entertaining without being patronizing. Do you and me both a favor and subscribe using my link in the description. It's completely free and takes less than 15 seconds to sign up. There's no reason to not subscribe to Morning Brew if you're interested in business, finance, or tech. Follow my link in the description. Thank you, Morning Brew. Now, I'll get a couple of smaller bowls and divide this dough roughly into thirds for 3 different flavors. Chocolate chips are nice, but so are butterscotch chips, maybe a 1/4 cup of those, and an equal quantity of, say, pecans. I think nuts work much better in biscotti than they do in softer cookies. I threw an extra dose of vanilla in there, and I'll mix that up. It's great to do multi-flavor biscotti when you have tons of little half bags of random chunkies left over from previous baking adventures. This will be my almond one. White chocolate chips are very nice with almonds, whole or slivered, whatever. And here's my almond extract, much stronger than vanilla extract, so be careful, though I'm still liking a big splash. Just for fun, let's color this. In the logic of sweets, almond is sometimes green, just as raspberry is sometimes blue. Lord knows why. Put in a little more color than you think you want because it's going to lighten a bit as it bakes. At this point, we've added enough moisture that I think I want to mix in a little extra flour. If I don't roughly match the texture of the other dough, this one will spread more in the oven and maybe overbake. Done. I'll wipe off the beaters a bit, but I'm deliberately mixing these in ascending order of darkness so that I don't really have to worry about color pollution. You won't see the green through the brown. A couple of tablespoons of Dutch cocoa, like 15 grams, and I'm going to balance that with an extra pinch of sugar and a little glug of oil. This counters the cocoa's drying effect. Then let's play some more peanut butter chips, and I've got some whole macadamia nuts. I deliberately did the chocolate dough in the biggest mixing bowl because it tends to make a mess when you mix it, and it might be so dense that you have to knead it a little by hand. I find that the chocolate dough has to feel a little firmer and drier than the others if you want it to cook and spread at the same rate as the others. Baking sheet with some parchment. If you don't have parchment, I'd grease and flour it a bit. I'll form my dough into a thick snake and then flatten it a little bit. Same deal with greenie. Thick snake, then flatten into a long bar. This gets you a pretty even thickness and baking throughout each piece. Again, I'm shaping in ascending order of darkness so that I don't have to wash my hands. The chocolate dough should feel a little stiffer and drier. If it doesn't, it's going to spread really flat. Couldn't tell you why. Now you can have some fun with toppings. I've got some demerara sugar, big crystals of less refined sugar, slivered almonds over here. Really pile on your toppings because the surface area is going to expand a lot in the oven. Plus, not everything is going to stick, though I find it helps to push the nuts in a little bit. For the powdered sugar on the chocolate, just pile it on. Do not press it in. If you press it, it dissolves a little and it doesn't look very pretty. Whatever will stick, will stick. There we go. Kind of funny how at this stage they don't look at all like what they're going to become. I've found 325 convection or 350 conventional works best. That's like 160 or 180 C. And I'll bake them until they feel just firm enough to cut. These have been in half an hour and they still feel soft and gooey at their centers. After 45 minutes, it's much better. They shouldn't feel hard on the inside yet, but they should be springy and pillowy at their center with a firm outer shell. Pull these out, and I have the best results if I cut these as soon as possible, as soon as they have cooled firm enough that I can lift them off the parchment without breaking them. The softer they are, the cleaner the cuts I get. Cutting at an angle just for pretty and set aside that end piece. Then basically cut these as thin as possible. Too thin and you'll crush the loaf with your knife. Too thick and they'll be hard to fit between your back teeth. I'll lay those each onto the baking sheet as I go. No need for grease or parchment or anything now. They're baked. They're not going to stick. Almond one next. I tried doing this with a serrated knife. I tried different knife strokes. I find I get the cleanest cuts if I use my chef's knife, but I wield it like a bread knife. Saw back and forth with almost no downward pressure until it catches and bites through that outer shell. Then I can push the knife down and through without crushing the loaf. You can position these right next to each other on the pan. They are not going to spread at all anymore. Got to blast through this last one because it's cooling fast and firming up. Saw with minimal pressure until the knife bites through the brittle shell, then push through the rest. The firmer this cools, the more brittle it becomes, and that kind of thing starts happening. Oh well, this whole recipe should fit onto one pan. Back in the oven these go to dry out and go crispy. Those end pieces are already crispy, so you can occupy yourself with those while you wait. How hard you bake these is up to you. Just remember that they're going to get a little firmer as they cool, so I pull them when they feel just barely still soft in the center, just a teeny bit of squish left. Those had an hour 15 total in the oven, though I'm sure your results will vary. Go by feel, not by the clock. Let them cool and steam out all the way, and you can seal these up and keep them for a lot longer than other cookies. Surely that's why biscotti and rusk and other twice-baked things were invented in the first place. Dry things last a long time. And of course they have a satisfying crunch, though the high butter content has ensured that these are still crumbly and will not shatter your teeth. Plus, butter good. Use this recipe to clean out your baking drawer of random half bags, and let's see what you come up with.